Good morning, everyone. I'll be giving a presentation on the principles of the synodality. First of all, this takes up a section in the Vadimecum, and it will be available online in two places, both in the Vadimecum and also I've separated it because it's a rather comprehensive and important section. It's basically showing principles of how the synodal process unfolds. There are four principles that are presented in the document. Who can participate? Process that is truly synodal, listening, discernment, and participation. Attitudes for participating in the synodal process. And finally, kind of an odd in some ways, but important principle to avoid pitfalls in the course of the synodal process. So let's go looking at the first principle, who can participate? To make the synodal process effective and for the church, for ourselves individually, and to make it beneficial for the body of Christ, it is important that all the baptized realize that they make up the living body of Christ, the sensus fidelium. Okay. It is important too that excuse me a moment. I am. It is important for the baptized to hear the voices of other people, though, in the local context. So while all the baptized are key for this, we need to hear the voices of other people, people who've left the faith, people of other faith traditions, people of no religious belief, etc. So while all the baptized are specifically called to take part in the synodal process, no one, no matter their religious affiliation, should be excluded from sharing their perspectives and experiences, insofar as they truly want to be help the church and on our synodal journey of seeking what is good and true in life. Okay, so it is everyone who has good intentions, basically, are called upon to participate in this process. Okay, the second principle is a process that is truly synodal, that is listening, discernment, and participation. Okay, the synodal process is oriented to listening, moving towards discernment. And that can only happen through participation. So we listen so that we can orient ourselves towards discernment. And this process is trying to see this as a way of life, not just something that we're doing for a meeting or for a month, or even just for preparation for this particular synod. This is trying to see listening, the synodal process, as a part of our way of life as church. Listening moves to discernment, which involves reflection and engages the heart and head in making decisions in our concrete lives, how to seek and find the will of God in our life. We'll be hearing more during the synodal process about discernment. But if listening is the method of the synodal process, discerning is the aim, then participation is the pathway. So it refers again back to the previous principle. Participation is important, and we must make a special effort to listen to those who we might see as tempted to see as unimportant, or those who have a different point of view than our own, and we need to consider ways of possibly changing our way of thinking. Okay, the third principle is perspectives for participating in the synodal process that enable genuine listening as we participate in the synodal process. These perspectives are in many ways our working principles. There are attitudes to help us better make the synodal process happen. Okay, so I won't go through all of them. They're listed here and in the next slide, but I want to highlight a couple of them. You can get more detail again in the full document. Synodal requires us taking time to share, humility in listening, openness to conversion and change in our life. And it's important, I think, in the synodal process that we take a time to leave behind our prejudices and stereotypes. One I think is very important. It's been highlighted a lot by Francis, is to overcome the scourge of clericalism on the part of clerics, but also on part of those, the faithful, who how they view clerics in the church. Cure the virus of self-sufficiency that, I don't need anybody else. Overcoming ideologies. I think this important one towards the last year is give rise to hope. This process is not meant to focus just on the challenges we face, but looking at the possibilities that are possible in the church. Synods are a time to dream and spend time with the future. The document then goes into some specific attitudes which will help in the process. I'll just list those: innovative outlook, being inclusive, listening to each and every one. So these are practical tips, and they explain them in the document. I think important is reaching out through our ecumenical and interreligious partners, inviting them into the dialogue. Okay, the final principle is avoiding pitfalls. In any process, we can sometimes go down rabbit holes that just don't lead anywhere. So it's important to avoid these pitfalls. As on any journey, we need to be aware of possible pitfalls that will hamper our progress. Several pitfalls that must be avoided in order to promote the vitality and fruitfulness of the synodal process. So they list them in terms of temptations, which I thought was rather nice, and is many ways what the synodal process is, spiritual, to avoid temptations spiritually in many ways. Temptation of wanting to lead ourselves instead of being led by God. The temptation to focus on ourselves and our immediate concern. Again, this gets back to the whole idea of hope. Temptation to only see problems, rather be hopeful about possibilities. The temptation to focus only on structures. We can look at the structures in the church, but we also need to look at ourselves, at people, at our spiritual journey together. Temptation not to look beyond the visible confines of the church. Temptation to lose focus. Temptation to get into conflict and division. Temptation to, and I think this is important, synodal process is not about voting as, for example, as a parliament does. Some representative body does, where there's winners and losers. It's about coming to discerning the will of God and coming to a consensus on what that means for ourselves. temptation to listen to those, only those who have already involved in church activities. Again, that gets back to participation. Be broad and open-minded in our ability to listen beyond the confines of the church. So these, in many ways, the synodal journey is about listening, in the process leading to discernment, and that can only happen through participation. Again, these documents are this section is in the Vademecum, which is, I think, is online, right? And also specifically this section 2, the principles of a synodal process. They're worth reading, so do take your time to do so. Thank you.